Dead by Daylight's story game, The Casting of Frank Stone, released on September 3rd, 2024 to mixed reviews. And over the past year, all I've really heard about it is that it's not very good, it's buggy, it crashes. The story is confusing, and we just have Wraith's axe as well. It's just sitting here on like a desk. What? It's got an unrewarding or unfulfilling ending. All of these things I'd heard about the game, so when I finally played it, almost a year later, I was surprised to find I really loved it. And it got me wondering, where did this game go wrong? For someone who loves Dead by Daylight, and especially Dead by Daylight's lore, this game was a ton of fun. I feel like the right thing to do is empathetic, but I sort of want to say howdy partner to it.
Howdy partner, how's life on the range?
Did he hit his head or something? The hell is wrong with you?
And one question I repeatedly asked throughout my stream of it was, how was this not a chapter? Which I think coincidentally is the first sort of issue with the game, and the reason why people struggled to connect with it or even bothered to play it in the first place was because it didn't have any direct connection to DBD and its characters, which I do think is sort of an issue. The key and simple way I think this game could have been sort of saved is by simply releasing a Frank Stone chapter alongside the game's release, encouraging players to go check out the full game, check out the full backstory of the characters they're interacting with. Because if you didn't know, Frank Stone the game is essentially just a really big lore entry on how these characters eventually came to the realm. Boom, 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 boom. That's those notes. I find it kind of shocking and a little sad that a whole game dedicated to the lore and dedicated to crafting a story is coming to the game in the form of a legendary skin for the Trapper. It just seems like such a shame and such irony almost, after the devs themselves had mentioned Frank is definitely not the Trapper or related to him. It's really odd. Beyond it not having an accompanying chapter though, I do think the game has other reasons as to why it maybe wasn't much of a success, and I think maybe the main reason is simply where the game went with the story. Based on the first trailer, if you remember it, it actually seemed like it was going to be sort of a straight slasher almost, with a group of teenagers entering a mill to record a movie, unbeknownst that Frank Stone was within, waiting to hunt and kill them, with there also being some sort of entity presence around the area too. It seemed pretty straightforward from that first trailer, and I think that's what got people hooked, because that's the trailer everyone watched too. The game is not quite like this. Whoa. Is this the crazy time device she has, maybe? The time machine? Getting a little bit intimate for siblings. Frank?
You should be at least 80 years old.
So we've got a book about the Dredge, seemingly, and maybe the Garden of Joy, called Fold of Fear. Uh-oh. Akkadian Demon. In fact, this trailer doesn't even include the whole other side of the story that's set in 2024. The other trailer I found, which seemed to have come much closer to release, seemed to confuse a lot of people, and I even looked under the trailer description into the comments, and there were people just asking where the marketing for this game was, which I sort of have to agree with. Beyond that first trailer, which did get really good numbers, there didn't seem to be many others which really drew people in the same way. And Frank Stone is far from a linear story. It's a story which actually jumps all over the place across multiple universes with primarily two casts of characters. Now this is old news if you've been reading the DBD lore this whole time, if you've been engaged with the lore and you've been reading sort of the deeper lore entries, that kind of thing. It's no shock really, but I can imagine that for someone who doesn't really read the lore and someone who mainly focuses on the gameplay, maybe they've read the base killer lore and the base survivor lore and maybe a few tome entries, they're gonna find this story probably quite jarring and quite confusing actually, because I feel it sort of takes on the approach that you've read all of this deeper stuff. It's quite heavy with it, which of course is fine for someone like me who has read those entries and is really interested in that stuff. But if you're not, I can imagine this was quite intimidating almost, to open up this game you assumed was maybe a more linear sort of slasher story, to find out that it's this crazy multiversal or omniversal plot sprawling across different timelines and multiple different storylines. The first 2 or so hours of the game, in fact, I think are a big reason why a lot of people probably didn't like it too. Even as someone pretty in touch with the DBD lore, I found that quite confusing, jumping between 3 different timelines at the very beginning, and multiple sets of characters. It left me sort of asking the question, why are we doing this? What is happening? What's the point? And again, I'll reiterate here that I'm saying this all out of love, by the way, because I really enjoyed the game and I had a lot of fun with it. But these things really stood out to me, even as someone who did love the game and wanted to love it as I was going through it. These were key things that stood out to me that I took a mental note of that would potentially turn me away had I not already known of the lore before or been engaged with it. It would have been a sort of block where I'd be a bit too confused, a bit too thrown off by the experience, and maybe I'd want to sort of just turn away and stop the game. It got me wondering too, is Frank Stone really a Frank Stone problem, or is Frank Stone more of a general DBD lore problem? Is Frank Stone's sort of tepid response down to it being a bad game? Which, again, I really don't agree with. Or is it because the vast majority of DBD players probably have a very different perspective on DBD and its lore in general compared to what the lore actually is, if that makes sense? DBD's lore, after all, has been a little rough on the accessibility side. It's always been quite hidden away. It's been better accessed externally out of the game on the wiki. To unlock the lore, you've always had to do challenges, unlock it through the tomes. And even then, the lore was quite confusingly ordered, and even when you did connect the pieces and it sort of made sense, it wasn't in the right order still. It's a very confusing experience, I think, the wider DBD lore, and although I like the delivery of it, and I really enjoy it as someone who's done my best to engage with it over time, it made me think, how many people have done that though? And in turn, how many of those people have then gone on to play Frank Stone? Because I imagine the vast majority of people who play DBD don't read that much of the lore, at least from what I can gather. If you're here watching this channel, there's a good chance you do watch a decent amount. But even my channel, I mainly discuss killer lore entries or survivor lore entries. We never go into the deep lore all too much. But the deep lore is honestly what the wider lore is about for the most part. Much of DBD's wider world is not really even about the killers or the survivors or anything like that, which may come as a bit of a surprise, I imagine, to people who haven't read it. So what I think people were expecting when they went into Frank Stone was potentially quite a linear story, a story about how a killer reached the realm, how a group of survivors may have fallen to the same fate. The trailer, after all, established a group of 4 facing down a single killer. That seems pretty much like a trial, right? And that's what people might assume is the lore on the surface level. So when we got this sprawling omniverse story, many were probably confused and a little thrown by it, and I really don't blame them. It makes me sort of hopeful though, too. Especially with Behaviour's recent words about trying to rework how the lore is presented. I really hope for the future going forward that the plan is to try and make it a bit more accessible, a bit clearer maybe even in presentation. Because whilst there is so much good about the wider and deeper lore, I do think it's really struggled over the years because people have struggled to engage with it. People have struggled to even find with it or know it exists. It's maybe been a little too committed to the idea of a fractured narrative, with it only becoming even more complicated with its range of unreliable narrators and stuff like that. It's a really interesting story, but it takes a lot of work, I think, to really understand it and engage with it. So fingers crossed something big is coming for the lore, hopefully a big rework and hopefully in the way of accessibility, because I think it's such a shame what's happened here. For a game so incredible, it really makes me wish it had done better, because I feel like because this game hasn't done so well, we may never see something like this again, and that would be such a shame. It really would be. As someone who has really tried their best to get people to engage with the lore and care about the lore and all of these things, it would really make me sad if we never got something like this again, because this was such an amazing experience, and I enjoyed it so much. Let's hope the lore rework is good. Damn. I really liked that. That was really cool. I really enjoyed that. Honestly a banger game. And after playing that, I cannot fathom for the life of me why they wouldn't make this a chapter. I really enjoyed the game though. I really liked it, and I hope everyone enjoyed watching it along with me too. The other issue, of course, was the performance issues, and I think this is worth mentioning. Throughout the game, despite me running it on the absolute lowest of settings, or almost the lowest, I was still getting freezes during certain cutscenes, and this was definitely noticeable and admittedly quite annoying. Alright. Again, the freezing's not the stream, it's just the game. It's lagging for me too. I'm sure it'll catch up in a second. There we go. There was also one part of the game which came at a very pinnacle and important moment where the game kept crashing. It took me about an hour to fix live on stream, where myself and chat troubleshot a bunch of issues to try and fix it, eventually managing to. We just got fatal error. The game has crashed. Again? No! Please. No! No! Are you serious? Please. We moved it to an SSD. The files are all validated. My settings are on like the lowest they can possibly be. Maybe because I'm thinking maybe if I do something simple like run it and in sort of like administrator mode or whatever it's called.
It was right here. It was right in here.
Oh! We're through! We're through!
Do you still have yours?
We're through! Admin mode!
Show it to me.
Admin mode did it. And whilst it was sort of a fun little detour, it does feel disappointing, and it's always a shame when a game crashes like this, because, well, you just sort of get the feeling games should work, you know? Especially almost a year after its release. I admittedly did find this quite disappointing, and I thought it was worth mentioning, even if, for the most part, the game was completely fine, to be honest. Aside the small freezes during some cutscenes, it wasn't that bad. It performed very well, actually. The criticism of the game feeling unrewarding is one that I found a bit unfounded, actually, after playing through it all. I think the reason people said this is because they felt the ending was sort of a set ending, with the only difference being which characters live. But, I mean, this seems to be a pretty common thing throughout supermassive games. For example, the only other one I've actually played is Until Dawn, and I know basically the only options you really have in that game is who lives and who dies, which I think is completely fine. I think having so many branches and so many different like official endings would probably be far too much for the game to handle, so I thought this was fine. I think the core narrative was compelling enough, the characters were really amazing, and whilst it did take some time to get going, I thought the interconnectivity of them really worked well. I also quite like the pace of this game. It's a very slow game, I think, throughout it, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does take some getting used to. I was expecting a lot more action in this game, a lot more jump scares and moments of shock, but that never really came. It was actually quite a slow but enjoyable story, and again, maybe that's just a bit of an acquired taste. There's so much that's charming and just really great about the game though. There's so many small little Easter eggs for Dead by Daylight that was just really cool to uncover and, you know, read into. I found myself just really engaged with the world, asking lots of questions, trying to investigate as much as I could, and for the most part it did pay off. So if you're thinking of playing Frankstone, I would definitely recommend it. Give it a shot, try it out, try and push through the opening, even if it does feel all a bit complicated, and I think you'll really love it. The casting of Frank Stone is the kind of story you read about in the deeper lore and the wider DBD universe. A story of the true evil of the entity, the Black Veil and those trying to counter them, and all of the poor people stuck in the middle just trying to survive. If you get a chance, please, please give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.